So right.
Even short people with really big heels in the front.
Is Rose not coming forward?
If I didn't have these heels, I would be.
I want to make sure.
Sure. Yeah, no.
Mayor, you have flats on.
I'm moving towards
Oh,
some
wow.
lowish heels. I'm trying to be
Oh, wow.
more practical.
It looks like I
more
don't like you
comfortable.
guys.
Come on in.
All right, come on. I'm going to stand right next to you, okay?
Oh, that's
that
great.
that way we don't give any bad impressions.
Yeah,
We're balanced.
I think so.
You ready, Chief? You good? Okay. Good morning. Thank you, all of you members of the council, almost all of the council, for here today, and to Chief Blimeister and other members of law enforcement. Chief Duncan is back there, and Sheriff Clark. About 6 weeks ago, we announced new steps in the city that we are taking to prevent gun violence here in Lincoln. Specifically, steps to limit access to firearms by children and by those who are a danger to themselves or others. Since then, the City Council has passed 2 ordinances related to gun safety. The first new law, passed in September, requires all gun thefts be reported to law enforcement within 48 hours of when the theft is discovered. The second ordinance deals with firearms in motor vehicles. The original version of this second ordinance called for guns left in vehicles to be stored in a locked glove box, trunk, or case. On October 28th, the council passed an amended version of this original ordinance. The amended version requires that firearms left in vehicles be stored out of sight and requires that all vehicle doors be locked. While I supported the original version of this ordinance, after careful deliberation, I have decided to sign the amended one as an incremental step forward. As a result of this new amended ordinance, our police department now has a means of enforcing the law regarding firearms in vehicles that does not rely on firearm owners to self-report their own violations of the law. That said, I encourage and will continue to encourage gun owners in Lincoln to keep unattended firearms out of their motor vehicles. Storing a firearm in your car is a bad idea, and responsible gun owners know this. In 2018, the public reported 149 stolen firearms to the Lincoln Police Department, and 24 of those were stolen from vehicles, many of them ending up in the hands of juveniles. Let me be clear. An unattended firearm left inside a motor vehicle poses a risk to the safety of every person in Lincoln. Because of this, and because public safety is our residents' and our administration's top priority, I remain committed to further action as we move forward with a multifaceted approach to preventing gun violence. We will continue to support state legislation to create extreme risk protection orders, commonly referred to as a red flag law. I have also joined a national coalition, Mayors Against Illegal Guns, which works to advance gun safety efforts at the local, state, and federal levels. We will continue to partner with Lincoln Public Schools in our joint effort to ensure the safety, success, and well-being of school children. And as part of our multifaceted approach to preventing gun violence, I'm pleased to announce that free gun locks are now available to the public. These free gun locks were also a part of the plan we announced in September in response to a report and the recommendations from the Child Access to Firearms and Safe Storage Task Force. Gun owners and those applying for gun permits can receive free gun locks by visiting the Sheriff's public reception window at the Justice and Law Enforcement Center at 575 South 10th Street. The window is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and no paperwork or questions are involved in the process. I want to thank the Sheriff's Office for their partnership in this effort. Sheriff's Captain Josh Clark is here today if anyone has questions about that process. And I also want to thank the Suicide Prevention Coalition for its efforts to fund the gun locks. The group originally hoped to raise enough money to buy 300 gun locks. But thanks to the generosity of donors, we have enough support to purchase 600 gun locks for our community. Our plan also includes public education and weapon safety training by the Lincoln Police Department, so thank you again, Chief Blimeister and your team, for your efforts. And at this time, I'd invite any of the city council members who are here today to say a few words if they'd like, and then we'll go ahead and take some questions. Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I do want to thank Mayor Gaylord Baird for her leadership in guiding us and stewarding this process. You know, working with the task force that brought many of these ideas to our attention. I really want to thank my colleagues on the Lincoln City Council for working collaboratively and cooperatively on these measures that will help keep our community safer. Are we far from done? No. But we continue to work with our state legislature on coming up and crafting good legislation. And I have to thank law enforcement, both on the city side and the county side. You know, we can't enact legislation without their input and feedback on how it impacts the work that they do to keep our community safer. Their efforts working together, we will continue to come up with legislation that will keep our community safer. This is a step in the right direction, and we hope to be able to work with the task force in the future to reassess and evaluate if our efforts have been successful. Have they moved the dial? Are they making our community safer? So I am just so grateful to so many that are here today that have contributed so much of their time, talent, and their expertise in making our city safer and enacting good legislation.
Okay, well, we'd be happy to take some questions.
Nebraskans Against Gun Violence say that this latest ordinance proposal that went through, that now just means you can just leave your gun in a car as long as it's locked and put it under a blanket, you're okay. They say that it doesn't go far enough, and they were hoping there'd be some amendments to it that would make it a little bit tougher. Is that a possibility, or is everybody satisfied with this proposal that was passed by the council?
That group was hoping for a stricter law. We acknowledge that. What makes this new amended ordinance a step forward is the enforcement mechanism. In the past, the law that was on the books before sent the message that you shouldn't store guns in your car, but law enforcement had to rely on people who had guns stolen from their car to acknowledge that they'd left the gun in the car for more than 24 hours. If they didn't do that, it was next to impossible to cite someone for breaking the law. In this new set of, because of the new legislation, if a law enforcement officer comes upon a vehicle with a firearm in plain sight, they can immediately cite the person for having violated the law. There is a clear enforcement mechanism that did not exist before, and I think that is what we've been pointing to as the progress that this legislation achieves. Does anyone else want to speak to that?
What kind of penalties would be involved with that again?
You want to speak to it?
I can
Yeah, why don't you?
certainly.
It's infractions.
Yep, it's a tiered approach. The first and second offense are going to be infractions on if someone would leave their firearm in an unlocked or uncovered manner in a motor vehicle. But once again, just what the mayor has said and all the members of the council and all of you can assist us tremendously by sending the message that it is not a good idea. Don't leave your gun unattended in your motor vehicle. We can only do so many enforcement and legislative efforts, but really it comes down to decisions of responsible members of our community. And time again, we're seeing them make those appropriate decisions. When we think about the numbers, 24 that were stolen in 2018 from a motor vehicle, again, we're a community of 300,000 people, and 24 is 24 too many. But the efforts of all of you, this coalition, and the collaboration, as Councilwoman Raybold spoke about, is most important. So,
And the infraction would entail how much of a penalty?
I don't know the fine off the top of my head. It's contained within the ordinance itself.
$100,
Yeah,
maybe. I'm not sure.
we can follow up with that.
It's minimal. It was, I think, it was like $250 for the first infraction, and then, or maybe it's $100 for the first infraction, and then $250 for the second. He will hold, in the original ordinance, there was a possibility of jail time, as goes with many of the misdemeanors. This was removed from the language.
We'll have that to you.
Up to 100 for the first and
Right.
second, and between 1 and 300
For the second.
to
Okay.
be determined by a judge.
Yeah, and the third is a misdemeanor.
Right.
And so the misdemeanor, how much of a penalty is that?
Again, that's going to be determined by the judge throughout that process, and they would take into account the previous offenses.
But a misdemeanor could be up to $500 and up to 6 months in jail.
Yes.
Chief, how often do your officers run across, guns that they see that are either in unlocked cars or uncovered?
Yeah, proactively, that would be a rare occurrence. Once again, it's not happening. Most of the times where we're coming in contact with this is when people are doing the responsible thing, and if a firearm is stolen, that we've talked time and time again that initiates an investigative process that really is the focus, right? If it's been stolen, then we need to respond. We need to utilize our investigative tools to expeditiously recover that firearm and prevent tragedy from occurring. But there may be occasions where there is a report of a firearm that is in plain view within a motor vehicle, and the amendments to this particular ordinance will allow us to have some enforcement and preventative measures too on that side of it. That's a good question, Andrew.
So if you're, if somebody has their gun stolen from a car, how do you know if it was unlocked? How do you know if it was covered? Is that, or is that part, you were just saying that you could be ticketed for if your gun is stolen and then later on you find out. How would you prove whether or not it was covered or was unlocked?
Yeah, through the entirety of that investigative process, and that is something that we're preparing a training update for our officers. If there is evidence of forced entry into the motor vehicle, such as a broken window or a pried locking mechanism, that is going to be indicative of that the vehicle was locked. As far as whether the gun was covered, that's going to be based upon the investigative process, both the interaction with the victim of that crime and through other components such as video evidence.
Senator, throwing out some new issues, and I mean, you've probably taken a lot of heat from gun owners. Why is this just not just feel-good legislation? Why do you think this is helpful?
Well, it's helpful for two main reasons. One is it brings the issue of safe storage to the forefront in our community. And two, it does give the Lincoln Police Department a tool to use that is enforceable. And I have taken a lot of flack through this process, and I think other members of the council have too, from different constituencies. But I think what we've come up with here is an ordinance that represents the input from the community as an entirety.
And as far as stiffening or tightening up this, how would you stand as far as, this is just, that's what some people are saying, this is just the foot in the door, the camel under the tent, nose under the tent. Where's your line in saying?
Well, my line is the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Nebraska, which every person up here has taken an oath to uphold. So it's a line that is not necessarily clearly defined, but every time I look at any kind of legislation, I look at where it stands in relationship to those two documents.
So do you think your previous proposal would have been unconstitutional, requiring a container in the car to have a lock?
I don't necessarily feel that was unconstitutional, but I feel like the conflict was really between a handgun and a long gun. And visitors to our community who come to use our recreational facilities for shooting competitions and such. So I did not want to have two different standards, one for long guns and one for handguns. And that was based on input from the community.
And Mayor, you could have not signed this.
Mm-hmm.
Was it close? Was it a close decision on whether you signed or didn't sign this?
Well, I waited till today to sign it. But I'm interested in building bridges, and I think we make progress when we're working together. And I believe that this is a small step forward, so I signed it. And the good news is we have an award-winning police department that uses data and evidence to drive its policies and practices. And I'm grateful to be working with law enforcement who are rigorous in their analysis of how our laws are working in real time. And if over the next year we determine that all of a sudden firearm thefts from vehicles are spiking, well, we can reassess whether or not this policy is working and whether or not it needs to be changed. And I believe everyone up here is committed to that kind of real-time monitoring of the data and evidence about the efficacy of our work.
If you didn't see a drop, though, would you think that it wasn't effective if you don't see a drop in gun thefts?
Want to speak to that? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Comment on that. And again, the data analysis was a subcomponent of this task force recommendations and something that we are committed to and really a foundational strength of the Lincoln Police Department. The data sets are relatively small when we're looking at that. Too many guns stolen, but yet when we're looking at a trend analysis, we really have to factor in a whole bunch of different things, and that's what our crime analysis unit does. And so we are going to dive deeply into those reports of thefts and try to make a determination of, did this legislative or ordinance change impact that in any manner? Did the ordinance change on mandating of reporting increase the number that are being reported, or is there a decrease? And we'll continue to follow all of that information as the years go by and work with council and with the mayor's office to be able to most appropriately address those through ordinance, education, and most importantly, prevention.
And I guess on the other side of it, is that one of the reasons why so many guns are left in cars is because people have concealed carry permits and they're not allowed to take them into different places. I guess why not look at that aspect as well, allowing people to take them into different places more often so they wouldn't have to leave them in the car?
What you're referring to is a part of Nebraska state statute in the CCW permits. And as far as allowing additional access, some of that is limited by statute, some of it is limited by the individual entities that have that ability to restrict firearms or allow firearms coming into their business. And so that is something that can be looked at, but that has been within the confines of Nebraska state statute for some time now. Andrew.
And now we have two measures right here, two gun measures. Now this is to the mayor or councilors. Could you see in the foreseeable future any other measures being taken up by the council?
Sure, I can answer that. I know that the task force looked at a whole number of initiatives. We've talked about a few. Certainly maybe increasing the purchase age from 18 to 21 for those that purchase a long arm shotgun. Some things like that. Certainly revisiting after we've had a chance to assess the data and have we moved the dial on this. We want to continue to partner with the state of Nebraska, the legislature. Mayor Gaylord Baird mentioned extreme risk protective orders. We're hoping that Senator Adam Moorfield will be able to get that piece of legislation out of the Judiciary Committee with the support of the entire legislature. We know that will give us additional tools to keep our communities safer, give law enforcement the ability to work with families, colleagues, to make sure that individual that may be going through a mental health crisis has the care and attention they need, at the same time making sure that if that individual has access to firearms in their possession, that those are removed through due process, working with our judicial system to ensure that we continue to protect not only that individual, but their family and the community. So we look for partnerships. We want to continue to collaborate with the stakeholders. We want to continue to collaborate with all elected officials on not only keeping our community safer, but keeping our state of Nebraska safer. And sometimes it's even more effective when we work with the Nebraska legislature so that there is a greater uniformity throughout not only our municipality, but throughout all the municipalities in our state of Nebraska. So we look for partnerships.
Do you find it a difficult issue because of orchestrated pressure against making any kind of restrictions?
Well, I think, it is clear, certainly to all the members on the city council and the mayor and her staff, the Second Amendment is unimpeachable. We all agree on that. We all agree that we all have a responsibility to make sure that we do everything we can as elected officials, as representatives of the people that we serve, to enact sound legislation that is not in violation of the Second Amendment, but efforts are needed. We know from polling data throughout the entire United States, people want us to take initiatives. They want us to take measures. They don't want us to stand by and continue to do nothing. And that is a mission that has been embraced by elected officials, both at the local, county level, but also on the state level. 89% of the people would like us to see extreme risk protective orders enacted. 89% would like to see universal background checks. So these are all measures that we want to continue to work with the stakeholders, elected officials, and the people that we represent.
But you experience pressure against that, do you?
Of course, there's always pressure on talking about a very controversial, emotional issue for some people. That's to be expected. Certainly, Mayor.
Well, what you're referring to pressure is what I would call public input. And that's our job, is to hear people out, whether they're, yelling or whispering. When they come to the council, that is their right and our civic duty to hear what they have to say and to try our best to respond in ways that we think work best for the community. So we will continue to listen, we will continue to partner, and we will continue to work towards a more just and safe community. Our youngest and most vulnerable among us are relying on us to be the adults in the room, and we will continue to push forward with measures that we think will advance that purpose.
What's your biggest concern about not doing anything, keeping the status quo on this issue?
Blood on the streets. To be a mayor in America today is to think through how you would lead your city through a mass shooting. It's becoming increasingly common. Our kids are living in fear that we didn't have growing up. And I don't want to wake up one day and wish we'd done more. I don't want to wake up one day and have to console grieving families. It's our job to keep people safe, and we do that in a number of ways beyond gun violence measures. But this is a sensitive issue, and we need to continue to persevere in a way that we can bring people together, because so much depends upon it. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I gotta leave.
Good luck
I got
with
a
your
patient in
appointment.
15 minutes.
Thank you,
so-
Chief. Okay.